also very lucky that Stuart Reed came in this morning with a camera and said if it's okay with everyone, he'll take the service. And Keith was fine with that, so we're going to go ahead with that. Are there any announcements? If not, we'll go ahead with the prelude, Marcia.
Chalice lighting words. We light this chalice to celebrate Unitarian Universalism. We are the church of the open minds. We are the church of the helping hands. We are the church of the loving hearts. I'm going to be reading to you today some selections from the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving address, but I wanted to give a little background. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy, also known as the People of the Longhouse, is a confederation of 6 Native American nations who were called Iroquois by the French. And this Thanksgiving address is really one of their gifts to the world. According to Robin Kimmerer, in the Onondaga language, it's known as the words that come before all else. So I'm just going to read, it's a very long, I'd say extended prayer at Thanksgiving, so I'm going to read part of it. Not the whole thing, but one paragraph for opening words, another paragraph for our prayer or meditation, and one for our closing words. Today we have gathered, and when we look upon the faces around us, we see that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. So now let us bring our minds together as one, as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. Now our minds are one. And let us sing together our opening hymn, number 41, You That Have Spent the Silent Night. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humankind in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. And our responsive reading this morning is number 441, to worship. To worship is to stand in awe under a heaven of stars, before a flower, a leaf in sunlight, or a grain of sand.
To worship is to be silent, receptive, before a tree astir with the wind, and as the shadow of a cloud.
To worship is to work with dedication and with skill. It is to pause from work and listen to a strain of music.
To worship is to sing with the singing beauty of the earth. It is to listen to the storm, to the still small voice within.
Worship is a loneliness seeking communion. It is a thirsty land crying out for rain.
Worship is kindred fire within our hearts. It moves through deeds of kindness and through acts of love.
Worship is the mystery within us, reaching out to the mystery beyond. It is in inarticulate silence, yearning to speak. It is the window of the moment, open to the sky of the eternal. Our story for all ages today is called Sugaring Time by Catherine Lasky, with photographs by her husband Christopher Knight. And they're black and white photographs, and it shows kind of the old-fashioned way of maple sugaring without the plastic tubes, but with a team of horses and a sled and tin buckets and spiles. You know, you've seen it. I can't read the whole book for you, but I did want to read these opening words. There is a time between the seasons. It comes in March, when winter seems tired and spring is only a hoped-for thing. The crystalline whiteness of February has vanished, and there is not yet even the pale green stain in the trees that promises spring. It is a time out of time, when night in central Vermont can bring a fitful late winter storm that eases the very next day into sunshine and a melting wind from the southeast. Many people complain about this time of year. Snow cannot be counted on for sledding or skiing. Cars get stuck in muddy roads. Clothes are mud-caked and hard to clean, and the old folks' arthritis kicks up. Everyone, young and old, gets cranky about staying indoors. But for a few people, this time is a season in its own right. For them, it is sugaring time, when the sap begins to flow in the maple grove, or sugar bush as it is called. It is a time that contradicts all farming calendars that say crops are planted in the spring, cared for in the summer, and harvested in the fall. This crop, maple sap, is harvested in March, and this is part of the specialness of sugaring time. It is special, too, because young people have a reason to go outside, snow or no snow, mud or no mud, and older people have a reason to believe in the coming spring.
as well.
I just want to share that I do have a joy. My daughter, who is living in North Carolina, is moving back home, and she's here now. So I'm really excited. She's been gone for 3 years. Okay. So all the kids are home right now. It's a little hectic, but
Nice to have that kind of hectic day, right? Yes, Joe.
I received a text from Lynn. She's feeling better. She's taking a short walk every day. Things are, she thinks maybe in about 3 more days she'll be back to, more or less back to normal. So I think she's been sick for about 10 days maybe.
Yeah,
So,
about 2 weeks, actually.
yeah, so she's definitely happy that things are coming along.
Yes. Any others? Hearing none.
May the joys and sorrows that have been spoken, as well as those that remain unspoken, be held in a spirit of loving compassion. Now I'd like to share with you a second reading from the Haudenosaunee Thanksgiving Address. This will introduce our time for silent and musical meditation. We now turn our thoughts to the Creator, or Great Spirit, and send greetings and thanks for all the gifts of creation. Everything we need to live a good life is here on Mother Earth. For all the love that is still around us, we gather our minds together as one and send our choicest words of greeting and thanks to the Creator. Anishinaabe. This is a group of indigenous peoples of the Northeast Woodlands and Canada, including the Ojibwe, the Potawatomi, the Algonquin, who now live in area as far as from Manitoba in the north to Oklahoma in the south due to forced relocation in the past. This is the story of Nanabozo, the Anishinaabe original man. Teacher, part man, part manito or spirit. When he walked through the world, he took note of who was flourishing and who was not, of who was mindful of the original instructions and who was not. He was dismayed when he came upon villages where the gardens were not being tended, where the fish nets were not repaired, and the children were not being taught the way to live. Instead of seeing piles of firewood and caches of corn, he found the people lying beneath maple trees with their mouths wide open, catching the thick, sweet syrup of the generous trees. They had become lazy and took for granted the gifts of the Creator. They did not do their ceremonies or care for one another. He knew his responsibility, so he went to the river and dipped up many buckets of water. He poured the water straight into the maple trees to dilute the syrup. Today, maple sap flows like a stream of water with only a trace of sweetness to remind the people both of possibility and of responsibility. And so it is that it takes 40 gallons of sap to make a gallon of syrup. This is from the chapter in Robin Kimmerer's book called Maple Sugar Moon. That's from Braiding Sweetgrass, which I'll read to you some more from later. But for now, let us sing hymn number 94, What is This Life? Raise your hand if you've ever tried making maple syrup. Wow, yeah, 4 of you. Is anybody doing it this year? I haven't myself, but I have seen it done, and I've tasted that unprocessed sap, which is a nice drink. But my purpose today is not to talk about how to make maple syrup so much, but instead to share with you some stories about the history and maybe even the philosophy of maple sugar. For example, do you know who first discovered how to get maple sugar from the sap of the maple tree? Any guesses?
I I always heard it was Native Americans, but
Good guess. Good guess, but according to oral tradition, they learned how to do it from the squirrels. Let me quote to you from Robin Wall-Kimmerer's book, who I mentioned before. She's a member of the citizen Potawatomi Nation. And these are her words. It is said that our people learned to make sugar from the squirrels. In late winter, the hungry time, when caches of nuts are depleted, squirrels take to the treetops and gnaw on the branches of sugar maples. Scraping the bark allows sap to exude from the twig, and the squirrels drink it. But the real goods come the next morning, when they follow the same circuit they made the day before, licking up the sugar crystals that formed on the bark overnight. Freezing temperatures cause the water in the sap to sublimate, leaving a sweet, crystalline crust like rock candy behind, enough to tide them over through the hungriest time of year. Our people call this time the maple sugar moon. The month before it is known as the hard crust on snow moon, and people living a subsistence lifestyle also know it as the hunger moon, when stored food has dwindled and game is scarce. But the maples carried the people through, providing food just when they needed it most. They had to trust that Mother Earth would find a way to feed them, even in the depths of winter. But mothers are like that. In return, ceremonies of thanksgiving are held at the start of the sap run. This is from Kimmerer's book called Braiding Sweetgrass. How many of you have read this? Oh, wow. Another 4 of you. So I think maybe some of you were there also in 2018 when she spoke at the Monadnock Summer Lyceum.
yeah, a lot from this church.
Yes, I remember seeing you there. She gave an excellent talk. So you know, or most of you know, she's a biologist. She teaches at State University of New York. And her book weaves together, as it says here on the cover, indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and the teachings of plants. I want to read you one more passage here from about how her ancestors made maple syrup. She says, people of the Maple Nation made sugar long before they possessed trade kettles for boiling. Instead, they collected sap in birch bark pails and poured it into log troughs hollowed from basswood trees. The large surface area and shallow depth of the troughs was ideal for ice formation. Every morning, ice was removed, leaving a more concentrated sugar solution behind. The concentrated solution could then be boiled to sugar with far less energy required. The freezing nights did the work of many cords of firewood, a reminder of elegant connections. Maple sap runs at the one time of year when this method is possible. Wooden evaporating dishes were placed on the flat stones over the coals of a fire that burned night and day. In the old times, families would all move together to sugar camp, where firewood and equipment had been stored the year before. Grandmothers and the youngest babies would be pulled on toboggans through the softening snow so that all could attend to the process. It took all the knowledge and all the arms to make sugar. Most of the time was spent stirring, good storytelling time when folks from the dispersed winter camps came together. But there were also pulses of furious activity. When the syrup reached just the right consistency, it was beaten so that it would solidify in the desired way into soft cakes, hard candy, and granulated sugar. The women stored it in birch bark boxes called macaques, sewn tight with spruce root. Given birch bark's natural antifungal preservatives, the sugars would keep for years. So back then, the maple sap was used primarily to make sugar rather than syrup, sugar being much easier to transport. The early European settlers also learned to make maple sugar at a time when cane sugar was an expensive luxury. For some northern settlers, maple sugar carried another distinct advantage, as Helen and Scott Nearing pointed out in their classic Maple Sugar book in 1950. They wrote, "Beyond furnishing the settlers with a needful commodity, there was another reason why the sugar from a native tree was hailed as a godsend by most of the population. A movement was on foot from the beginning of the 18th century to abolish the slave trade and all it implied in the hunting of humans, their exploitation by forced labor, and the profit made from the sale of their living bodies. The slave trade, it was said at that time, was contrary to the laws of God and the rights of man. In no occupations were the slaves more widely used than on the sugar plantation." Early farmers' almanacs exhort their readers in the month of March, "Prepare for making maple sugar, which is more pleasant and patriotic than that ground by the hand of slavery and boiled down by the heat of misery. Make your own sugar and send not to the Indies for it. Feast not on the toil, pain, and misery of the wretched. Sugar made at home must possess a sweeter flavor to an independent American of the North than that which is mingled with the groans and tears of slavery." The early abolitionists recognized that a thriving maple sugar industry could eliminate the need for slavery, writes biology professor Stephen Soap. In 1789, Benjamin Rush, a signatory of the Declaration of Independence, was one of the founders of the Society for Promoting the Manufacture of Sugar from the Sugar Maple Tree. Their ultimate goal was to lessen or destroy the consumption of West Indian sugar and thus indirectly to destroy Negro slavery. It didn't take much for Rush to convince his friend Thomas Jefferson to abandon cane sugar. And though he had his own slaves, Jefferson was a quick convert. He agreed that the sugar maple tree produces a sugar equal to the best from cane. And what a blessing, he said, to substitute a sugar for that which it is said renders the slavery of the blacks necessary. In addition to abolishing slavery, our president-to-be saw in maple sugar a way to further cut ties with England and become more economically self-sufficient. He even planted a grove of sugar maple trees at Monticello. As you know from history, this idea didn't really gain foothold as an economic weapon, but the principle of using our consciences regarding our food consumption remains a sound one today. So from history, I move on now to what you might call the philosophy of maple sugaring. Earlier I mentioned Helen and Scott Nearing, whom you may remember as pioneers of the Back to the Land self-sufficiency movement, which they referred to as the good life. A large portion of the income from their Vermont homestead came from maple sugaring. And in the closing chapter of the Maple Sugar book, A Life as Well as a Living, they conclude with these words: "In short, what we have been developing is a source of livelihood from the earth, from maple as it happens, for any one of many household crafts would have served the same purpose. It is hardly possible to overemphasize the importance of this relationship with the earth, its rhythms, seasons, and cycles. We think we are rediscovering the secrets that some of our forebears in the Green Mountains knew so well, the secrets of simplicity, adequacy, decency, neighborliness, self-respect, and a never-ending attachment to the marvels of the life of nature and of society that we contact on every side and of which we are integral parts. We have earned from maple and found a means of livelihood. We have also learned from maple. The occupation of sugaring has been a thoroughgoing education and broadened our contacts with life in its many aspects. The young Thoreau in his journal wrote, "Had a dispute with father about the use of my making the sugar. He said it took me from my studies. I said I made it my study and felt as if I had been to a university." A complete syrup and sugar maker comprises in himself a woodcutter, a forester, a botanist, an ecologist, a meteorologist, an agronomist, a chemist, a cook, an economist, and a merchant. Sugaring is an art, an education, and a maintenance. May it long be the mission of the maple thus to sweeten the cup of life. Pete Seeger, I believe, captures the philosophy of maple sugaring in a song that he actually wrote as a Christmas present to the Nearings. And I think he uses it as a metaphor for harmony, living in harmony with the seasons and with nature, for patience. Anything worthwhile takes a little time, and for good timing, taking the syrup off the flame at just the right time. So I will conclude with Pete's song, Maple Syrup Time. And gather firewood late in the winter. It's maple syrup time. You need warm and sunny days, but still a cold and freezing night time. For just a few weeks, maple syrup time. We boil and boil and boil and boil it all day long, till 97% of water evaporates, just like this song. And when what is left is syrupy, don't leave it too long. Watch out for burning maple syrup time. I know it's not the quickest system, but each year I can't resist it. Get out the buckets and tap the trees in time. Making it is half the fun and satisfaction when it's done. Keep up the fire, maple syrup time. My grandpa says perhaps it's just a waste of time. But no more than this attempt to make a happy little rhyme. So pat your feet or swing your tail, but keep in good time. Keep up the fire, maple syrup time. I'll send this song around the world with love to every boy and girl, hoping they don't mind a little advice in rhyme. As in life or revolution, rarely is there a quick solution. Anything worthwhile takes a little time. We boil and boil and boil and boil it all day long. When what is left is syrupy, don't leave it on the flame too long, but seize the minute, build a new world, sing an old song. Keep up the fire, maple syrup time. Sing that part with me. Keep up the fire, maple syrup time. One more time. Keep up the fire, maple syrup time. Let's sing together our closing hymn, number 163, For the Earth Forever Turning. She supports our feet as we walk about upon her. It gives us joy that she still continues to care for us, just as she has from the beginning of time. To our mother, we send thanksgiving, love, and respect. Now our minds are one. Let's say together our words for extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. I think we'll we're going to have another chance to sing along here with the postlude Maple Sugar Time. Keep up the fire.
Thank you, Keith.
Thank you so much.